3 days after I transferred $47,000 for my son's wedding, his fiancée sent me a message saying the rehearsal dinner was being kept to immediate family and the people who'd really been involved in the planning. I was in my garage when my phone buzzed. I had a pipe wrench in one hand and I read it with the other. I read it twice. Then I set the wrench on the bench and went inside to find my reading glasses, because I wanted to be absolutely sure I hadn't made an error. I hadn't. My mother wasn't included. She's 76. She'd already bought a dress. My brother, his wife, my 2 cousins, and the man who drove my wife to her treatments when I couldn't leave a job. 11 people removed from a seating chart I had never once been shown. I didn't reply. Not that night. I looked at the time instead. The bank had cut off wire transfers at 3 o'clock that afternoon, and there was something about what I'd sent on Thursday that nobody in the family knew yet. Before I take you back there, hit like, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read them. Alright, let me go back to Thursday. I'm 57 years old. I work as a pipe fitter out of a union hall in Wellington County, Ontario. I have for 31 years. I drive a 2012 Ram 1500 with 240,000 kilometers on it, and I have no complaints. My wife passed away 4 years ago, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis. Her name was Paulette, and she used to say I was the only man she'd ever met who could wire a full panel and still forget a burnout bulb in his own kitchen. She wasn't wrong. After she died, I paid down what was left on the medical bills, the line of credit we'd used for the months she wasn't working, and I did it without mentioning the number to anyone. Not to my son, not to my brother. I just paid. It took 3 years. That's what you do. My son has been with his fiancée for 4 years. She's a decent person. She works in marketing, and she is, in every visible way, exactly what you'd want for your kid. Her mother is a different matter. She runs a real estate brokerage on the main street of Elora, and she has the kind of confident, room-filling energy that makes people feel like they're being assessed for something. Which, it turned out, they were. The wedding planning started 14 months before the date. There was a group chat called something like June Celebration, with 32 people in it. I was added without being asked. Her mother sent 4 or 5 messages a day, venue options, canapé tastings, something she kept calling an aesthetic board, which appeared to be a collection of photographs of other people's weddings. In 6 months, I sent 2 replies. One was a thumbs up when they announced the venue. The other was a question about parking for out-of-town guests, which nobody answered. The venue was an old mill property outside of Fergus, restored timber frame, stone floors, a catering kitchen added in the 90s. Beautiful building. I'd done work in the area and knew the property slightly. The tour was on a cold Saturday in February. Her mother led it. The events coordinator met us at the door. A woman named Cheryl, about 50, clipboard in hand, practical boots. The kind of person who has managed enough catered events to be completely immune to sentimentality. Near the end of the tour, at a long table by the back windows, Cheryl spread out a contract and turned it toward the group. 2 signatures, she said. Venue contact and the guarantor, the person responsible for the final balance and any damages. Her mother signed the top line without pausing. Then she slid the contract toward me and tapped the page twice. Sign here, she said. It's just standard, don't worry about it. Someone laughed at the back of the room, her mother's sister, I think, and I did what I always do in a room full of people I don't know well, which is I don't make a scene. I signed my name. As we were heading out, Cheryl stopped me at the door and held out a business card. Anything to do with payments, she said. Contact me directly. I said thank you. I put the card in my wallet behind my health card. I want to be straight with you about something, because this is the part where you'd say I should have asked more questions. You'd be right. But I've spent 31 years in trades where you don't stop a job to read paperwork that someone with a clipboard is telling you is routine. You sign the form and go back to work. That's what I know how to do, and that's what I did. The following Saturday, I drove to Hamilton to see a private seller about my wife's car. A 2019 Subaru Outback, low mileage, dark green, with a crack in the left tail light she'd gotten the week before she got sick. I drove it through 4 winters and told myself I'd get to that tail light. I never did. I sold it for $22,000 in cash, put the bills in an envelope, and drove back to Wellington County in the Ram with the radio off. The other $25,000 came out of my RRSP. I'm 57. Early withdrawals come with a withholding tax, and depending on your bracket, the government takes a significant piece. I did the math at my kitchen table on a piece of paper, not a spreadsheet, and then I stopped doing math. Some things you decide before you finish calculating. I wanted my son to start his life without a debt hanging over it. But that's what I'm for. On the Thursday before the long weekend, I drove to the branch on Fountain Street at 2:30 with my ID and the account number I'd written on a folded piece of paper. The woman behind the counter has worked that branch for 11 years. Her name is Marlene. She knows my account. I told her I needed to send an e-transfer, a large one. She walked me through it. The memo field asked for a note. I typed 2 words, for the kids. That was it. She asked if I wanted a confirmation email sent to myself. I said no. Then she said the thing I heard and didn't really absorb, the way you hear a weather report for a town you're not driving through. She said, "It's after 3, so with the long weekend this won't post until Tuesday." I nodded. I took my receipt. I folded it into my breast pocket and drove back to a job in Guelph where a man's main stack had been gurgling since October. I didn't tell my son. I figured the money would show up in their account when it needed to. 3 days later, standing in my garage, I got the message. The thing I need to explain is why I'd never just said something. Why I hadn't mentioned what I was planning to send, or what it had cost me to send it. And the honest answer is that Paulette used to do that part. She'd call my son on a Sunday and say, "Your dad's been up since 5 worrying about you. He just doesn't say it that way." She told people what I'd done. I'd stand there embarrassed and grateful at exactly the same time. She was the narrator. I was the one who fixed things and didn't explain himself. She's been gone 4 years. When she died, the narrating stopped. Nobody picks it up. There's no handoff ceremony. The story just stops getting told, and after long enough, it stops existing as far as anyone else is concerned. I stood in my garage with the message on my screen, and I thought about 11 people. My mother, my friend Vince, who drove 2 hours the night Paulette died, and didn't once ask me how I was doing, because he's known me since 1993, and he already knows the answer. My brother, his kids, people who'd been part of my son's life before he could spell his own name. Crossed off a chart I wasn't consulted on. I opened my banking app, and there was a word I hadn't expected to see. Pending. The transfer was still sitting there, unprocessed, because Marlene had told me exactly that, and I'd filed it away in the category of information I didn't need to think about. I didn't reply to the message, not that night. At 8:50 Monday morning, I was parked outside the branch on Fountain Street before the lights came on. I had Cheryl's card in one hand and my phone in the other. Marlene unlocked the door at 9 and didn't look surprised to see me. She has a good face for bad mornings. I told her I needed to know if the transfer had posted. She sat down, she typed, she said, "It's still processing on our end. The receiving bank hasn't accepted it yet. Can it be recalled?" She went and got her branch manager, a man I'd spoken to twice before about a mortgage renewal. Careful, late 50s. The kind of person who thinks before he talks. He read the screen, then sat down across from me. He said, "Yes, there's a window. Federal rules allow a recall request before final settlement. There's a fee, $40, and there's a release to sign." The release said that if the other party could demonstrate they'd relied on the payment, any resulting dispute was mine to manage, not the bank's. Open-ended liability. I understood it. I signed it. He said, "We'll submit it. Most of the time it works, not every time." "What's most of the time?" He paused. 8 and 10, maybe 9. You won't know until this afternoon. I drove to a job in Elora, a commercial kitchen that needed a gas line run to a second range. Vince showed up at 11 with 2 Tims in a paper bag. He'd heard through my brother that I'd had a rough weekend, which is how things travel in a county of 38,000. He didn't ask. He just started helping me run the line without being invited. 40 minutes in, I told him everything. The car, the RRSP, the message, the seating chart. His own name on the list of people who'd been cut. The bank that morning, the 8 and 10. He kept working the whole time I talked. "That's Vince. He thinks better with his hands busy." When I finished, he set his pipe cutter down and looked at the wall instead of me. "They crossed your mother off," he said. They did. He was quiet another full minute. Then he asked the one question nobody else thought to ask that whole month. He said, "What are you going to do with it when you get it back?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I had spent 16 straight hours thinking about the recall. I had not spent 1 second thinking about the money itself. What it meant now? What a man does with $47,000 he's just pulled out of his son's wedding. I don't know, I said. He nodded like that was the right answer. Stopping it is the easy part, he said. Deciding what it means after, that's the job. He picked his cutter back up. At 2:47 that afternoon, my phone buzzed on the floor of the van. Wire recall confirmed. Funds returned to originating account. Minus $40. $47,000. Back where it started. I sat in the van. I want to tell you I felt like I'd won something. I didn't. I felt like a man who just carried something heavy back up a staircase for no reason. The money was mine again. It had never been about the money. I sat there 10 minutes. Then I took Cheryl's business card out of my wallet. I didn't write to his fiancée. I didn't write to her mother. I didn't say one word to the group chat, which that week was deep in a debate about whether the centerpieces should have eucalyptus in them. I wrote 4 sentences to Cheryl. I've rewritten them maybe 30 times since, and I don't think I'd change one. Miss Hollister, I'm writing to withdraw as financial guarantor on the file for the June 22nd event. Please have the other parties designate a replacement per the contract terms. I'm available by phone if you need anything from my end to process this. I'm copying my son on this message. I copied my son. I did not copy her mother because her mother wasn't the venue coordinator. I sent it at 3:22 on a Monday afternoon in a mill property parking lot in Elora, with grease on my jacket sleeve. And for 4 days, nothing happened at all. The group chat spent Tuesday on centerpieces. Wednesday, there were 12 messages about chair covers. Thursday, someone posted a countdown graphic. 89 days, nobody called me. Not his fiancée, not her mother. My son had been copied on the email. He'd seen it. He hadn't called either, and I understood that because he didn't have the vocabulary yet. I went to work. I ate standing at my kitchen counter. I watched the hockey game Wednesday night with the sound low, and on Thursday evening, I did something I'd have been embarrassed for anyone to see. I got a legal pad out of the kitchen drawer, and I started writing down everything I'd ever done for my son. Not to send it anywhere. There was nowhere to send it. I just needed to check whether I'd imagined the last 30 years. I wrote down that I was on a job in Brantford when Paulette went into labor and made it to St. Joseph's with 11 minutes to spare. I wrote down the transmission on his first car, a 2004 Civic he drove until the body gave out, $1,900 in 2017. I wrote down the damage deposit on his first apartment. I wrote down the 8 months he came back home at 22 when things went sideways, and I made room at my table, and I never once said a word about direction or school or, what are you planning to do? And I let him sit and figure himself out on his own schedule. 3 pages, front sides only. Somewhere on the 3rd page I wrote a line, and then I looked at it, and drew 2 clean strokes through it, and wrote something else underneath. I'm not going to tell you what it said yet. Friday morning, Cheryl sent 1 email to every party named in the contract file. I got a copy. So did my son, his fiancée, and her mother. 6 lines, no tone, no adjectives. The financial guarantor of record has withdrawn as of March 31st. Per Section 8 of the agreement, a replacement guarantor with demonstrated financial capacity must be designated within 10 business days. If no designation is received by April 14th, the booking moves to at-risk status and the date may be released. Please advise. C. Hollister, Events Manager, Fergus Mill Properties. 6 lines and a name. I heard later what happened on their end. Her mother read the email at 7 in the morning with a coffee in hand and went completely still, because the email referred to a role she hadn't known existed. A guarantor. She'd watched me sign a line at a table back in February and hadn't read what the line said. She called the mill. Cheryl wasn't in until 9. At 9:14, my phone rang while I was stopped at a red light on Waterloo Avenue. Her mother's name was on the screen. In 3 years, she had never once called me directly. Not when they got engaged. Not when they set the date. I let it ring. Then I pulled into a parking lot and listened to the voicemail. It was warm, bright. The voice she uses at open houses. She said there seemed to be some kind of mix-up with the venue contract, probably their system, and could I call her back when I had a moment. I called her back at 9:40. She picked up on the first ring. I told her there was no mix-up. I'd withdrawn on Monday, in writing. The warmth left her voice the way a furnace cuts out. She said, "Why would you do that?" "'Cause on Sunday," I said, "your daughter told me I hadn't contributed." A pause. She said, "That is not what she meant." I said, It's what she sent. She said I was being dramatic over a text message, that I was blowing this completely out of proportion. I said, I signed a line and I withdrew from it. That's the whole event. She said, do you understand what you're doing to this wedding? I looked out the windshield at a man crossing the lot with a bag of salt. I said, I'm withdrawing from a role that none of you count as a contribution. I'd think you'd be relieved. One less name to worry about. She said, this is petty. I said, one thing before you hang up. She said, what? You've been telling people the mill only fits 150 guests. I said, the contract says 200. The line went quiet long enough that I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. She said very evenly, I'll have my daughter call you. And she was gone. His fiancée didn't call. She posted a photograph of herself in a parking lot, tired, no makeup. The caption was 4 paragraphs long, and I'll only give you the shape of it. Family is supposed to lift you up. Some people would rather be right than be present. She was praying for peace. She thanked everyone for the love. She never used my name. She didn't have to. In a county of 38,000 people, most of them knew whose son was getting married in June. By noon, my phone had been doing things it has never done before. A nephew I'd coached in baseball for 6 years sent 2 paragraphs about tearing the family apart. A woman I'd met exactly once on her mother's side sent me a Bible verse about peacemakers. Someone screenshotted the post and sent it to Vince to make sure I'd seen it. I counted on Sunday evening. 41 notifications. I don't think I'll forget that number. At 4 in the afternoon, a direct message from his fiancée herself. Everyone thinks you're punishing us over nothing. You're twisting my words. I sat with that for about an hour. Then I did the one thing I did that whole month I'd actually call clever. I'm not proud of it exactly, but I'd do it again. I scrolled up in the same thread. Her original message was sitting right there. 8 days old. She'd never deleted it. I screenshotted it. Her words, her name, the timestamp. I sent it back into the same conversation without a single word of comment. The 3 dots appeared. Ran, stopped, came back, stopped again. She never answered. I want to stop here because this is the part where I nearly gave in. 41 notifications. My nephew, a kid I'd taken to every home game at the Gardens, telling me I was the problem. And I sat in my kitchen on a Sunday night with my thumb over the keypad, ready to type, I'm sorry, I'll make it right. If you've ever been the one person holding a line while everyone around you calls you the problem, hit like, so I know this room isn't empty, and tell me in the comments when you stopped explaining yourself. Alright, Thursday night my son found it. He found it by accident. He was going through their joint account, trying to figure out what had already cleared and what could still be redirected. He scrolled past the line and scrolled back up. Wire transfer $47,000. Received March 27th. Recalled March 31st memo for the kids. He called me at 11:15. I didn't pick up. I'm asleep by 10 on a work night. At 11:40, headlights came across my front window. He'd driven 40 minutes. I opened the door in a flannel shirt. He was standing on the step with his phone in his hand, down at his side. He couldn't get the first sentence out. He tried twice. What he finally managed was, is that Mom's car? That was my truck, I said. Your mother rode shotgun. My son is 32 years old and 6 feet even, and I have not seen him cry in front of me since the morning we buried his mother. He put his hand flat against the door frame and came apart. I let him. I put my hand on the back of his neck the way you do with a kid, even when he isn't one anymore. When he could talk, he said, I have to tell her. I have to show everyone tonight. Don't, I said. He pulled back and looked at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize. Dad, they think you didn't. I know what they think, I said. Let it sit. Let the venue tell them. He stared at me. He didn't understand. I could see it on his face. He would understand, I told him, in about 9 days. The letter arrived the following Tuesday. Certified mail, which cost about $12 to make a point. Her mother's real estate lawyer, a man who handles residential closings and whose name doesn't belong in this story, sent 1 page asserting that I had made a commitment upon which the family had detrimentally relied, and requesting I reinstate my position as guarantor within 7 days or face further action. I read it twice at the kitchen table. What I felt was relief, because a letter like that is a bluff. And a bluff means she has run out of the thing she's actually good at, which is getting other people to carry her decisions. while she collects the credit. I didn't call a lawyer. I forwarded Cheryl a copy of my withdrawal email with the original timestamp and added 3 sentences. Ms. Hollister, for your records, I have not made any written commitment to a dollar amount for this event, and no such document exists. I signed a role and withdrew from that role through the process your contract specifies. Please treat this as confirmation. She replied in 9 minutes, 2 words, noted thanks. 19 years of that woman's life in 2 words. The lawyer sent nothing further. There was nothing to send. I put the certified letter in the Manila folder, on top of my refrigerator where I keep everything. My wife hated that folder. It's still there. On the Friday before the engagement dinner, the celebration her mother had been planning for 6 weeks, 40 guests, the loft above the main hall at the mill, I wrote an email to my son and his fiancée, both of them, not her mother, 3 paragraphs. The middle one read, I'll put $10,000 directly into your joint account. No conditions on how it's spent. No receipts. No input from me on a single decision. I have one request, and it is not negotiable. My mother gets a seat at whatever you're celebrating. That is all. I read it out loud twice before I sent it. That was something Paulette taught me. I sent it at 8:20 Friday night. The reply came Saturday morning at 10:47. It did not come from my son. It did not come from his fiancée. It came from her mother's email address. 2 sentences. Thank you for the offer. Seating arrangements are not subject to negotiation. She'd answered an email addressed to her daughter and my son about my mother with the word negotiate. I set the phone down. I got a glass of water I didn't finish, and at 12:30 my mother called. She has a way of calling when there's nothing specific to call about. That's always how I know something's wrong. She said she'd taken the dress back. I closed my eyes. She said, they give you 30 days at that store. I still had 11 left. It worked out fine. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said, I've got other occasions coming. I'll find a different one to wear it to. It's all right, hun. Don't you worry. I'd held the door open as wide as I could for 6 days. They'd shut it. Whatever happened next wasn't mine to carry. The engagement dinner was the 2nd Saturday in April. I know what happened because my son told me most of it that same night, and Vince filled in the rest from his cousin, whose wife works the catering kitchen at the mill. 40 guests, loft space above the main hall, pine floors, taper candles, tall windows looking down over the lawn. Her mother had set up a framed display near the top of the stairs, cream cardstock, names handwritten in black ink, a header at the top that read, with gratitude, 38 names. Not one of them was mine. Dinner started at 6. Cheryl came up the stairs at 7:55 with her clipboard. The 10 business days had expired at 5 that afternoon. She was not there for the food. She waited at the top of the stairs for a pause in the conversation. When it didn't come, she took one anyway. She said, I apologize for the interruption. I need to confirm a replacement guarantor before I can hold the booking past tonight. Her mother was on her feet immediately. She smiled the way she smiles when a showing is going sideways, and she's still pretending it isn't. She said, Cheryl, we can absolutely sort this out first thing Monday. Cheryl said, I need a name and proof of financial capacity tonight. The window closes at close of business. Someone at the 3rd table asked, guarantor for what? Cheryl opened her clipboard. She put on her reading glasses. She turned to the signature page, and she read the line aloud in a room of 40 people, exactly as it was printed. Financial guarantor of record, and then my name. The playlist kept going. Nobody thought to turn it off. 40 people sat there with my name in the air, and directly behind Cheryl's left shoulder, the with gratitude display had 38 names on cream card stock, and not one of them said what she'd just read off that contract. Her mother recovered fast. She is very good. I've never once said she wasn't. She said, out loud to the room, he signed as a formality, for the paperwork. He hasn't put a cent into this wedding. My son stood up. He doesn't raise his voice. He never has. He reached into his jacket pocket, took out his phone, and set it face up on the table in front of him. He slid it toward the candle in the center where the light was. On the screen was the e-transfer confirmation, $47,000. Date, March 27th, memo for the kids. Nobody moved. My son said, that's the transfer. He sold my mother's car. He cashed out his retirement savings and took the withholding tax. His fiancée said his name quietly. He said, 3 days after that hit our account, you texted him that only parents who actually contributed were invited to tonight. Silence. Someone's fork went down against a plate. My son told me later that's the sound he still hears, not the voices, just a fork on ceramic. Then he said the last thing, and he said it looking at the display board, not at her mother. He said, "He wasn't on your wall, he was on your contract." He picked up his phone and put it back in his jacket and sat down. The room did what rooms do. 4 seconds where 40 people said absolutely nothing. 4 seconds is a long time when all 40 of them are doing it together. 31 of those 40 guests were her mother's clients, referral sources, or neighbors whose homes she'd sold. Every one of them had walked past that display board on the way up the stairs. It was a woman near the window. I was told she runs a mortgage brokerage in Center Wellington, who finished it, and she didn't mean to. She was looking at the guest list, folded under her plate, the way you look at anything when you don't want to look at people. She said, as mildly as you'd ask about dessert, "Is this the full guest list, or is this your referral list?" Nobody had to explain what she meant. Everyone in that room who worked in real estate knew exactly what she meant. And every one of them had just counted themselves. Her mother said, "That's an unkind thing to say." The mortgage broker said, "I count 14 people from the chamber at my table alone." That one question did more damage than anything I could have spent a year saying out loud. A man at the far table said, "Wait, is that why his grandmother isn't here?" And that's the one that cleared the room. Because most of those 40 people had grown up in Wellington County, and a fair number of them knew my mother. She ran Sunday school at the church in Fergus for 24 years. She ran the fall basement sale every October for 2 decades. She is not a woman you can cross off a seating chart without people noticing once they think to look. 3 people stood up from their tables and got their coats. Quietly, not dramatically, the way you leave a situation that has stopped being what it said it was. His fiancée went down the stairs and into the parking lot and was gone 40 minutes. Her mother stayed. She kept the smile on, kept talking about the ceremony timeline, the shuttle van from the hotel, the florist's delivery window. And not one person in that room was giving her the room anymore. 11 kilometers away, I was standing on a step stool in my hallway with a dead light bulb in my hand. I'm a pipe fitter. The one thing I never get to is my own house. That bulb had been out since February. I got the new one in. The hallway came up warm and yellow. I stood there on the stool with the dead bulb, looking at the ceiling like I'd accomplished something. My phone rang at 8:44. My son, road noise already driving. He told me the whole thing in about 90 seconds. Fast, doubling back, out of sequence. Cheryl on the stairs, his fiancée's mother with the glass. His own voice when he stood up sounding like somebody he didn't recognize. The fork on the plate. I didn't say anything the whole time. I stood there with a dead bulb in my hand. When he got to the end, he said it twice. "She read your name off the contract, Dad," in front of all of them. "All right," I said. "Not one person in that room knew," he said. "Not a single one." "All right, son." I sat down on the step between the kitchen and the hallway. My legs did that on their own. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I've told parts of this story since, and I've always cut this part out. I sat on that step and I cried. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about being right. It was 4 years of no one telling my story, and a woman with a clipboard who told 12 seconds of it by accident. My son stayed on the line and let me have it. I'll be grateful to him for that for as long as I'm upright. When I could talk, I asked him one thing. It wasn't what he was expecting. "Did anyone in that room say your grandmother's name?" He had to pull over. I heard the blinker. 3 people stood up and left because of her dad, he said. I put my hand over my eyes. Then I asked, "What about the wedding?" There wasn't one, not in June. Cheryl released the date the following Monday morning. A couple from Guelph had been on the wait list and they took it by Wednesday. The deposit was $11,000 and Section 9 of that contract is clear about deposits inside 90 days. It doesn't come back. The invitations had already been mailed. His fiancée sent a cancellation through the wedding website, and about 20 guests didn't see it and confirmed their attendance anyway, for weeks. The mortgage broker pulled 2 listings from her mother's firm the following month. I heard the combined commission on those was somewhere north of $18,000. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I felt about that, because the honest answer is complicated, and this isn't a story about me enjoying someone else's consequences. They split up for 6 weeks after that. It was the worst 6 weeks of my son's adult life, and I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing about my own part in it. I wrote it down on the legal pad. 11,000. Lost deposit. Not my money, not my decision. I underlined the second line 4 times, because I needed to read it more than I needed to write it. I never wanted that woman to lose $1. I wanted my mother's name on a piece of paper. She managed neither, and then she managed both. I told you there was a line on page 3 of that legal pad that I'd crossed out. 2 clean strokes through it. Something written underneath in the same pen. The first version read, "Paid for her medical bills in full." Underneath it I'd written, "Sat with her in every room she was scared to be in alone." The first one is a receipt. You can put a number on a receipt. That's exactly why it's the smallest part of what it was. The second one doesn't have a number and never will. 6 weeks after the dinner at the mill, Vince asked me the question again. We were putting up a cedar fence in his yard, and he asked what I'd done with the money. This time I had an answer. 25,000 went back into the RRSP. You have 60 days to redeposit after an early withdrawal and keep the contribution room. I redeposited on day 53. Marlene walked me through the form herself. The other 22,000, that was the car. I didn't try to buy it back. The man in Hamilton had already put winter tires on it, and I decided I didn't want to see it. I found a 2018 Outback in Kitchener. Private sale, slight rust on the passenger door. 89,000 kilometers. No complaints. That left some in the middle. I put it in an account with my son's name on it. And this is the part that matters. It's the only thing in this whole year I did differently than I've done anything in my life. I told him about it. I drove to his apartment on a Sunday and sat at his kitchen table and said the number out loud. I'd printed a single page. I said it between us. He said, "Dad, you don't have to." I said, "I'm not finished." I told him there was one condition, and it was the same one as before. This wasn't a wedding gift. This was a down payment on a house that he picked, in a room where her mother wasn't part of the conversation. If that's not what it became, it went back to my account, no hard feelings. He looked at the paper a long time. He said, "You could have just done it, like you always do." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" "Because the last time I did it quiet," I said, "it cost me everything but the money." He found the legal pad in August. He'd come over on a Sunday, and I'd sent him to the kitchen drawer for a tape measure. He came back out holding 3 folded pages instead. He sat on the arm of the couch and read the whole thing front to back. It took him close to 10 minutes. I stood in my own living room with my hands in my pockets like a man waiting on a verdict. He got to page 3 and turned it toward me so I could see the crossed out line. "Why'd you change it?" he said. I said, "Because the first one's an invoice." He looked at me. I said, "And the second one is you and me." He didn't say anything. He folded the 3 pages in half, and then in half again, and put them in the back pocket of his jeans, and I let him. I have never asked for them back. 3 weeks after that, his fiancée came to my house. Evening, no notice. She sat in my driveway with the engine running for almost 3 full minutes before she opened the door. I opened the front door. I didn't invite her in. I'm not proud of that part, but I didn't. She got about 4 words out before she started over twice. What she finally landed on was, "I didn't write that message." "You sent it," I said. "I know." She looked at the porch steps. "My mother typed it on my phone. She said it would land better coming from me. She said it needed to sound like it was just between family." I'd suspected it for months. Hearing it said out loud didn't feel like anything in particular. "Why did you press send?" I asked. And then she told me the true thing. I'll give her credit for it, because most people never get all the way to the true thing. She said, she co-signed our mortgage pre-approval, $390,000. If she walks from that, we don't get the house. There it was, 3 months of hell in one sentence. "I know what that makes me," she said. "It makes you someone who chose," I said. She started to cry, and I let her stand there. She said, "I want to fix it." "Words don't fix it," I said. "I've had a year full of words." She said, "Tell me what does." I'd thought about this. I had 4 months to think about exactly this. I said, "My mother gets an invitation. Not a text, not an email. A card in your handwriting with her name spelled right, mailed to her address. That is it. She said, "That's it." I said, "I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to write my mother's name on something and put a stamp on it." It took her 2 weeks, but she did it. They got married the following March, not at the mill, in Vince's backyard on a Saturday in the middle of a mild week. He has a flat lot backing onto a cedar hedge, and we put a tent up the Friday before. 4 of us, steaks into half-frozen ground, done in 5 hours and down in 2 the day after. 34 people. Folding chairs borrowed from the church hall. A caterer Vince's wife found who did a full buffet for $900. Total cost, and I know because my son showed me the sheet without me asking, $6,200. No display board, no gratitude sign. No one wrote down who gave what. I don't believe the thought crossed a single mind out there. Her mother came. I want to say that plainly. She was invited, and she came, and she sat in the second row in a gray coat, and she did not say one word out of turn the entire afternoon. She was quiet in a way I had never seen from her. There was nothing to perform. 34 people in a pipefitter's backyard. Not one of them was ever going to list a house. So she sat with her hands folded and watched her daughter get married, and that was all it was. But it was enough, and it was permanent, and I've made my peace with it being both. My mother came in a dark blue dress she'd found on her own in November, and not mentioned to me until the week of. She wore flat shoes because she said she wasn't going to be the grandmother turning an ankle on cold ground in front of everybody, and she was laughing when she said it. My son asked me to say something at dinner. Sprung it on me, which he did on purpose. I don't give speeches. I had nothing written. I stood up with a paper cup of coffee in my hand, and 34 people turned toward me, and I understood in about 2 seconds why Paulette always did this part. I said 4 things. I thanked Vince for the yard, and for being the kind of person who shows up with 2 coffees and no questions, which he's been doing since 1993. I told my son he'd stood up in a room where it would have been much easier to stay in his chair, and his mother would have gone through the ceiling with pride. I said his wife's name, and I told her, "You came to my door, and you told me the truth when you didn't have to, and I won't forget it." And then I stopped. I felt the whole thing turn over in my chest, and I did the one thing I had not done in 57 years. I said, "My wife used to tell people what I'd done because I never would. She's been gone 4 years, and I let everything just sit there in the quiet after, so I'll do it myself tonight, one time." I looked at my son. I said, "I raised this man with her first and on my own after, and I am proud of him." 40 seconds, that's all it took. My mother put her hand flat on the table. Vince looked at the grass. 3 people at the back said nothing and just looked at each other, which is what people do when something lands and they don't want to be caught feeling it. In the second row, her mother cried. Nobody went to her. Not her daughter, not one of the 34. I noticed it. I didn't go either. That was the last consequence of the whole year. I've decided it was a fair one. I got home a little after 10, came in through the side door, and the hallway came up warm and yellow. Same bulb I'd put in standing on a step stool the night everything fell apart. Still going. Probably get another 1.5 years out of it. I hung my jacket, put my keys in the dish. Then I did one thing before bed. I opened the kitchen drawer and put a photograph in it. My son and his wife standing under Vince's tent, and underneath it, at the back of the drawer, was the business card of a woman named Cheryl, who I have spoken to exactly 5 times in my life, and who I will never be able to thank properly without making it awkward for the both of us. So here's where I've landed, and then I'll let you go. I still pay. That hasn't changed, and it isn't going to. Somebody needs a deposit covered, a transmission bridged. I'm still the one for it. I made peace with that a long time ago, but I'm done doing it in silence. I used to think keeping it to myself was the dignified thing. It isn't. Doing it quietly sounds humble right up until you understand what you're actually doing. You're leaving the pen on the table and letting somebody else pick it up and write down who you are. She picked that pen up because I left it there. She wrote, "He never contributed." And for 3 days, that was the only version of me that existed anywhere. I signed my name where people can read it now. I stood in the hallway a moment. Then I reached up and turned the light off with my own hand and went to bed. If someone ever tells you that you didn't show up, go find out who's holding the contract before you say a single word. It's usually a shorter conversation than you think. Type 1 in the comments if you would have recalled that transfer. Type 2 if you'd have let it go and kept the peace. There's no wrong answer. I read everyone.